I arrived home late that evening, worn out from yet another work trip, and all I wanted to do was take off my shoes, pour myself a drink, and fall asleep. However, I realized something was wrong as soon as I entered the main door. Margaret was already waiting for me, or Marge, as I had known her since college. She wasn't watching one of her favorite reality shows on the couch or in bed. No, she had a strange, almost overly enthusiastic expression on her face as she stood in the kitchen with her hands clenched. She said, "Derek, honey, I have some news," in a high, nearly frantic voice. With my fingers running through my hair, I placed my luggage at the door. Whatever this was, I was far too exhausted to handle it. "What's up?" She inhaled deeply before whispering it. "I'm pregnant." The room fell silent, I promise. Time seemed to pause for a moment. It seemed as though my brain was having trouble processing the words, buffering them. "Are you expecting? Was she expecting a child?" Since that's what I was meant to do, I forced a smile. It was expected of me to be joyful, to embrace her and twirl her about like a foolish spouse in a romantic comedy. I pulled her into an embrace, but all I could do was nod stiffly. That's wonderful, Marge. However, it wasn't. Not for me. Because as soon as she said those words, the uneasy feeling in my stomach that I had been attempting to ignore for months became something I was unable to ignore. Then she dropped the second bombshell on me. "We're having twins, Derek. Twins." I was hit harder by that word than by the first. I took a small step back, examining her face. She was radiant, brimming with enthusiasm, and already reciting due dates and doctor's visits. But the pounding in my head was the only sound I could hear, since I was aware. I had a sneaking suspicion already. And this merely validated everything. I returned to the airport a few days later, this time for a work trip. I didn't mind traveling normally. The flights, the hotels, the calm of a new city, I enjoyed the regularity. However, something felt different this time, because I was reluctant to depart for the first time. Not because my wife would be missed. However, I didn't trust her, no more. I opened my laptop and took a seat, but I wasn't examining emails or spreadsheets. No, there was more to this. A folder I'd neglected for too long and kept locked away. It was there when I clicked to open it. The proof. Late-night suspicions for months. Bank records. Unaccounted for charges. I took a screenshot of the text messages before she erased them. And worst of all, the video. Everything was there. My worst suspicions were validated. I closed my eyes and clenched my teeth, letting out a sharp exhale. I had been misled by Marge. Over several months, she was now expecting a child, with twins. I was at a loss for what to do. Not quite yet. However, one thing was evident. That party she had been organizing for the gender reveal, it was not going to be the major event she had anticipated. For me, that is. The purpose of that party was not to celebrate. This had to end. Something changed in me the instant. Marge revealed her pregnancy. I was suspicious, but all of a sudden, I knew it was as if a switch had been flipped. And after you find out, it is impossible to unknow. I had been convincing myself that I was paranoid for months, while suppressing the feeling that something wasn't right. Marge was being Marge, a touch distracted, a little aloof. However, the facts were truthful. The late evenings, the covert phone conversations, the way she seemed too concerned about my trip plans. The man I continued to see in the backdrop of her life was the worst part. At neighborhood get-togethers, she would always laugh a bit too much with that person. The person who was always around when I wasn't home. Tobias. My fucking neighbor. Tobias was always the one. For the following 2 weeks, I pretended to be the ideal husband. I allowed Marge to show me Pinterest boards full of baby names and talk endlessly about nursery colors, acting as though we were still the dedicated, content couple that everyone believed us to be. However, At night, I was planning at night. I documented everything Marge had done, every questionable transaction, every late-night call, and every strange charge. I even retrieved Caleb's birth certificates, because then I began to question my wife. I began to question everything. And when did I eventually receive the DNA test results? My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white as I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the paper. I had a suspicion. Looking at it in black and white, though, that was not the same. I didn't own Caleb, the child I had raised for 6 years, who thought the world of me, who called me dad, who held my hand in times of fear. No, mine. I closed my eyes and breathed evenly and slowly. I felt like screaming. I wanted to punch a hole in the fucking dashboard and throw something. However, I didn't, because I couldn't get what I wanted by being angry. And fairness was what I wanted. Marge was excited because the gender reveal party was quickly approaching. She devoted hours to organizing games, creating lists, and inviting everyone we knew. She was unaware that this was more than just a party to me. It was a funeral, the passing of the life I believed I had. All the lies she had told me were killed. I was going to ensure that she experienced every moment of it. I grinned as a result. While she wasn't looking, I gave her a forehead kiss. I gave her the impression that she was winning. Because of the time she held that absurd balloon filled with pink or blue confetti while grinning in front of the crowd, I was going to destroy her whole universe. Individually, in full view of everyone, I was prepared, and the party day arrived sooner than I had anticipated. The house was bustling with preparations when I woke up early. Giddy with anticipation, Marge was rushing around, making sure the decorations were flawless. She rearranged the banner that said, "2 blessings on the way," and called, "Derek, can you grab the cake from the fridge? 2 blessings?" I steadied myself and let out a slow exhale. I had previously pondered how she could face me every day while being aware of what she had done. I took out the cake and placed it on the table as she talked to her friends in whispers and laughter. She was radiant, and for an instant, I was nearly impressed by how brilliantly she performed her role. Unfortunately, the last act was about to begin. There were many people in the backyard. The neighbors, family, and friends had all gathered to celebrate. Everywhere you looked were pink and blue decorations, and in the middle was a huge balloon that was just waiting to burst. Naturally, Tobias was also present. He pretended to be completely carefree while he stood close to the drink table and laughed with a few of the guys, as if he weren't these children's biological father. I stood aside and waited for everything to happen. Marge was drinking up the attention, expressing her excitement, and thanking everyone for attending. At last, she appeared on the small temporary platform that we had prepared. She signaled for everyone's attention by clapping her hands. She grinned at me as if we were the happiest pair in the world and said, "Thank you all for coming. Today is such a special day for us." I returned the smile. She probably believed she had everything under control. She didn't know. I stepped up next to her and said, "I actually have a little surprise for Marge before we get to the big reveal." For a brief moment, her smile wavered. I noticed, but not enough for anyone else. I retrieved a neatly wrapped box with a bow tied by reaching behind me. "Oh," she laughed nervously. "Derek, you didn't have to go ahead," I said in a firm voice. "Open it." The audience laughed, whispered, and waited. After a final look at me, Marge tugged at the ribbon and ripped the paper back. Her entire body froze when she opened the cover. Within, 2 paper stacks, divorce documents, as well as a DNA test. There was silence in the whole backyard. Marge's breath came more quickly as she drew out the top paper, her hands shaking as her eyes darted over the text. Then the second stack caught her eye. Caleb's name caught her eye. She noticed my name. Additionally, she noticed that the bottom was stamped with the 0.0% paternity result. The color left her face. The partygoers began to shift uneasily and whisper. There was a gasp. Marge's mouth was slightly open as she gazed up at me, but she remained silent. I turned to face the crowd at that point. I yelled, I shouldn't be the one standing here today, loud and clear. These twins? This big reveal? It's not for me. I raised my hand and gestured to the rear of the group. It's for Tobias. Everyone's heads turned. Tobias froze where he had been sipping his drink. His face became limp, and the color faded as quickly as Marge's. A pen could be heard dropping. The atmosphere was oppressively tense. Subsequently, the whispers evolved into intense shocks. People staring between Tobias and Marge are whispering his name. Marge shook her head angrily, holding the papers to her chest. Derek, this isn't what? I interrupted, my tone piercing. It isn't true? Because I have plenty more evidence if you need it spelled out for you. She had nothing, yet her lips parted. Since she was aware of her capture. Beside him, Tobias's wife appeared to be on the verge of being ill. Her hands shaking, she turned to face him. Tobias? What is he talking about? Tobias parted his lips, but nothing came out. No more phony smiles. Jokes are over. Only guilt. With a strangled sound, his wife pushed by him and hurried away in the direction of the home. Marge was crying uncontrollably now, gasping for air, shaking her head, and clinging to me as if that would make a difference. Derek, please, we can talk about this. I withdrew my hand. There's nothing left to talk about, Marge. Sign the papers. She shuddered all over. In front of everyone, her entire world, her flawless little lie had suddenly fallen apart. And me? I simply turned, picked up my keys, and left. For the first time in months, why? I was liberated. I heard mayhem as I walked out of the backyard. People were gasping, muttering, and looking at Marge and Tobias as if they had just been in a car accident. Marge remained on stage, tears running down her cheeks as she clutched the divorce papers and DNA findings, while his wife hurried off, pushing past people as if she had to get as far away from him as possible. Tobias appeared to want the earth to swallow him whole. But me, I simply continued to walk. I took my time, did not run. I went straight to my car after leaving the area and going through the home, because I didn't feel like the one drowning for the first time in months. At last, I was the one who was breathing. My phone was already exploding when I arrived home. Marge made 7 calls. I allowed it to ring. Tobias? He made one attempt. His number was blocked by me. The texts began to come in. Companions, family, partygoers who were just at the most bizarre gender reveal they had ever seen. A few were helpful. Holy shit, dude. I'm so sorry. Some people were inquisitive. Is this real? Are you okay? A few were simply taken aback. WTF did I just watch? None of them were answered by me. I sat at the kitchen table, poured myself a drink, and simply took a deep breath. It was done, or so I believed. Someone knocked on my door at about 11 o'clock in the evening. Not only a knock, a beating. Before I checked, I knew who it was. She was there when I opened the door. Marge. Her makeup was smudged, her breathing was labored, and her eyes were swollen from sobbing. Derek, please. I folded my arms and rested against the door frame. What do you want, Marge? With a nervous breath, she held out the divorce papers, her hands shaking, whispering, I can't sign these, she said. Not yet. We need to talk. I gazed at her. I ought to have shut the door in her face. I ought to have told her to burn in hell. However, I was curious to hear it. I wanted to know what justification she might have. So I moved out of the way. You've got 5 minutes. As if to keep herself together, she hugged herself as she entered. She began, I know I messed up, her voice breaking. I know I lied. But Derek, please, it wasn't what? I interrupted her in a cool, collected tone. It wasn't cheating? It wasn't a complete betrayal? Because I've got plenty of proof that says otherwise. She winced. Excellent. She blinked quickly and gulped hard. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I felt alone. You were always working, always traveling, and Tobias, he was just there. It was never supposed to be serious. I chuckled. In fact, I laughed. I reiterated, not supposed to be serious? Marge, you had his kid. Then you got pregnant with twins. You lied to my face for 6 years. How the hell is that not serious? She broke down in tears. I was scared. My voice grew piercing. You were scared? Marge, I raised Caleb. I loved him. I would have done anything for him. And the whole time you knew he wasn't mine. And you just let me believe it. She sobbed while covering her face with her hands. I let the silence linger, for there was absolutely nothing she could say that would make a difference. At last, she raised her head to face me, her eyes filled with desperation. We can fix this, she said in a low voice. I'll do anything. We can go to therapy. We can start over. I'll be honest with you from now on. Please, Derek. I just need one more chance. I gazed at her, and I didn't feel angry for the first time. I felt nothing at all. There's no fixing this, I stated. We're done. Her face fell apart. She gasped. But what about Caleb? He loves you, Derek. You're the only father he's ever known. I was struck by that one. I tightened my chest and stiffened my jaw. Since she was correct. I was loved by Caleb. However, I didn't cause that. She owned it. I added quietly, you ought to have considered that before you deceived me. A broken sob escaped her lips. Derek, please. I gave a head shake. Sign the papers, Marge. She gave me a long, intense look. Then she nodded slowly. I opened the door without saying another word. She lingered for a moment before going outside, as if she was waiting for me to stop her. I didn't. In her face, I closed the door. I locked it and simply stood breathing. At last, it was over. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers' ink is dry. Marge signed them. There was nothing she could do. Nothing remained for her to fight for, no money to claim, no assets to touch, and no lie to save herself. But she tried. Yes, she did try. She pleaded first, sent lengthy, wordy texts about how she still loved me, how we could rebuild, and how she could change. Then she became upset, claimed that I was a callous, ruthless jerk for squandering 6 years of marriage over a mistake, an error. That's the name she gave it, as if she had stumbled and fallen into a man's bed by accident, as if she had unintentionally misled me for 6 years. After that, I blocked her number. Nothing else could be said. Tobias, he lost everything. His wife quickly filed for divorce, and she grabbed almost everything he owned because of the proof I provided. His home? Lost. His funds? Paid in alimony and legal fees. Marge was all that remained of him, and based on what I've heard, the fissures appeared before they had even lasted 3 months. Since love had never been the focus of their relationship, it had included moving stealthily, the excitement of escaping punishment. But after they were no longer required to hide, when did they have to confront the fact that they were raising 3 children on a shattered foundation of lies? Everything collapsed. Excellent. In the mess they created together, let them rot. What about Caleb? God. It was the most difficult aspect. I had been his father in every meaningful manner for 6 years. I had taught him how to ride a bike, held him when he was afraid, and applauded him at every small victory. And I had thought he was mine for 6 years. However, he wasn't. Not by blood. Not in the manner that bound us together indefinitely. And even though it hurt me to leave that child, I loved him so much. I was forced to, since remaining in her life would have meant remaining in his. And I was unable to do that. I wouldn't allow her to continue to control me via him. So I decided, no fight over custody. No protracted altercations. No coerced visits where we acted as though nothing was wrong. I turned to leave, and it was painful. But sometimes the only way to preserve yourself is to leave. Months went by. I relocated to another city, began anew, and I felt free for the first time in years. No more falsehoods. No more treachery. No more worrying if the person lying next to me was concealing something every morning. Yes, I did meet a new person. Rachel is her name. She is nice, sincere, not at all like Marge. She doesn't remind me of what I lost, and she doesn't bear the burden of betrayal. She didn't feel sorry for me when I told her my story either. She didn't act as though I was destroyed. She simply shook her head, grinned, and said, "Damn, you really dodged a bullet, huh?" I chuckled. Yeah, I really did. And for a long time, first time, I did believe it. The conclusion.